Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the AI InterConnect Podcast. This is the place where funders, builders, and operators share how they shaping the next generation of technology with real impact. And today we're joined by someone who has been at the front line of modernizing justice system and is now pushing the boundaries of how artificial intelligence can transform the legal profession. Um, I'm here with Nicolas Lozada, CEO of Redek, a legal tech company focused on digital justice and AI-driven legal knowledge systems. Nicolas, thank you for being here. Very happy to have you on the show.
Laurent, thank you so much for having me here. It's such an honor. It's a pleasure to be here.
Wonderful, wonderful. Okay, first legal tech, I think, in my podcast series. It's going to be a great conversation. Nicolas, before we get into AI and legal tech, I'd love to start with your personal story. You are trained in law, you have worked across legal transformation projects, and you have built Redek from the ground up. What moment pushed you from legal practice into a building technology?
That's an excellent question, Laurent, because I think it was a process over the years. And what happened to me particularly is that I was never very happy. I was never satisfied about the way things were in Colombia. So the anecdote I used to tell is that when I was in second year of law school here in Colombia, we have 5 years of law school. So when I was starting my law studies here in Bogota, I got my first job as a legal assistant at a law firm here in downtown Bogota. And my first assignment, my very first day, I had to go to the courts, so that the Justice Palace here in Bogota. And I was shocked and how crazy, how agitated, and how disorganized it was. So it was very far from whatever I had seen in the movies. So I was basically alert to becoming a lawyer just by watching American movies. And, I was imagining that, the courts were just like very elegant buildings, and, people were all presenting very intelligent arguments before court. And that was all resolved in one day, right? As in the movies or TV series. But I realized that it was far from that. The judicial process in Colombia, I'm telling you, this was the beginning of the 2000s, over 20 years ago. The judicial process in Colombia before the pandemic were almost exclusively written in shape, meaning that you will have to submit printed papers before the court. And then I remember when I was at this first job, I was running before 4 p.m. because we had to submit to present those briefings to the court. It was far from what I've imagined, and since then, I mean, there was already internet and there were a lot of electronic means at the moment. And I said, why aren't we doing this in a more efficient manner? I mean, there are better ways to go and check what's the status of any legal proceeding or to submit briefs. You should do it by email. I mean, that came to me naturally, but it wasn't the case until almost 20 years later when the pandemic came and the government was forced to issue an emergency decree allowing for digital justice. It was just email justice or Zoom justice, as many people call it. So I took it upon my hands and said, like, no, we have to make a difference. I had the privilege to have worked at the Ministry of Justice when I was like 3 or 4 years after graduating, and we were working on including some technology-related provisions into what was then issued the arbitration statute or the code of civil procedure. It was basically legislation was allowing people to use technological means, and but that wasn't the case in reality. So we still continued with a procedure that was very much like in the 1800s. So it didn't change that much. So since I had this opportunity, and then I met many people in the international arena, including Colin Rule, Ethan Katz, Ornin Rabinovich. Those are the frontline leaders of online dispute resolution and the use of technology in the legal profession. I said, we should also make a difference here in Colombia. So after the pandemic in 2021, we opened a shop with Redek to start the first digital platform for arbitration and mediation, which we were promoting for both arbitration centers in Colombia. I'm now speaking from the Arbitration Center of the Chamber of Commerce of Bogota, and also with some public institutions, including the Consumer Authority in Colombia, the Superintendency of Industry and Commerce. So basically, that's how I started out. So it's been something that's been growing on me over 20 years. And my realization was something needs to be done, but no one's doing it, right? I was just a spectator of this lack of use of technology, and say from 2011, 2012, I started talking about this. I also teach at the External University here in Colombia. Well, nothing was happening. So if nobody's doing it, why shouldn't I do it myself? So we started to be the first legal tech company that was not just advising on law and technology, but actually doing something like trying to implement technology. So that's how it came up to be the case. And so we have several implementations now, and it's been quite a journey, but I'm happy about it.
Well, I love it. This is great. Okay, then you started Redek in 2021. What did you learn from the first version of the platform that guided your move into AI?
Yes. So okay, I was first inspired, and I have to acknowledge this, by my mentor, Colin Rule. He's been wonderful to me. So I met him when I used to work at the government. I was a delegate for Colombia before the United Nations Commission on International Trade Law. And they have a working group on ODR. And Colin, back then, I'm telling you, back in 2012, he was one of the industry leaders with his company. Back then, I think it was called Modria, on how to implement those kind of platforms, technological platforms in the systems. And then, so at first, I was working from the public policy side as a government advisor, as a public servant. And later on, I was a consultant. So we were working on rules for ODR on secure transactions. And then, so some conference here and there. But when we opened up Redek as an LLC in the US, because we started out in the US, when we started out with Redek, we noticed that, so we could use, for instance, Colin's technology, Modria's technology, and try to distribute it here in Latin America. But Colin was the person who told me you should try and do it on your own platform, build your own software, because the American market and the American needs are different from the Latin American needs, and you should focus on Colombia. So I'll be very happy to advise you. And he's the president of our board of directors. I actually had a meeting with him yesterday, but he was never involved in distributing his own software, which I believe was very generous, because he's the one who actually told me not to work with his technology, but try to start my own, to really make a difference and try to adapt to the needs of our own market, of our own institutions, taking into account our legislation and our particularities. So that's how we started out. We did a first pilot with the Office of the Attorney General here in Colombia. That was, I believe it was 2021, using Colin's technology. It was, back then it was called CREC, the CREC platform. And then since then, we started to develop our own. And that was at the end of 2021 and 2022. And we've learned so much. Of course, artificial intelligence was not what it is today. So this huge phenomenon that permeates every single technology. So it was a more classical approach to online dispute resolution. So what we did later on was to try to incorporate some aspects of artificial intelligence into our developments. And now in 2025, we have a standalone technology for AI, of course, for lawyers, like legal AI for knowledge management. So it's an evolution. So now we start out with Craig's platform, then we developed our own, and now we have several iterations. For instance, a conflict prevention platform, and we were getting the lessons from the very first one. And now we do not work exclusively on ODR and digital justice, but we also work for artificial intelligence applied to the legal industry as a whole, not just for dispute resolution.
Okay, very interesting. I love it. Then you see the legal profession evolving in the right direction in terms of AI adoption. And you mentioned also that AI for lawyers is now a primary focus for Redek. Let's break that down clearly for our audience. How are lawyers and institutions actually using AI today?
Well, they are more and more. I would say that. So here's the thing. When it comes to my personal experience, I always start talking about something and then doing something about it and adopting it myself. But I think that happens to every single person in the legal profession. As you may imagine, since this is your first legal tech talk, what happens with many lawyers is that they are very adverse to change. So in Colombia, but I think it's the case for the legal profession around the world. Lawyers are, I don't know if to use the word fearful of what's coming. And the first few years, I think I delivered my first conference on artificial intelligence and the potential for ODR back in 2018. So I started to talk about this in 2018. Our first standalone development for artificial intelligence at Redek was in 2025. So it took a few years. And I think it's the same thing with lawyers now. So when ChatGPT was released in 2023, first reaction was for lawyers here in Colombia, but in many places, AI cannot replace lawyers. And some people were even insinuating that the use of AI was unethical under the Colombian legal ethics rules. So that it was extremely unreliable, that it would hallucinate a lot, and it would never be able to replace or even be used for substantial purposes, for instance, for drafting judicial decisions or memoranda in the context of judicial proceedings. But that was just 2 years ago, and now 2 years have passed, and then it's unavoidable. People are using it more and more, and every day you get news about in 2023 it was huge news that one judge in Cartagena had used one quotation from ChatGPT just for one small um, extract of their judicial decision. Now it's evident just yesterday, I think it's a decision dated November 5th. So there was a judicial decision released by the Colombian Supreme Court indicating, okay, guys, we know that you guys are using artificial intelligence. We can't deny it, but please do not make up the sources. Do not make up the precedent, the judicial decisions that you're basing your decision upon. So the approach has changed a lot. At the beginning, everyone was saying, you shouldn't use it. And now I'm actually teaching artificial intelligence for arbitrators. Just today, we're having a course now that it's being sponsored by Redek and the Colombian Arbitration Committee to teach people how to use it and how to use it ethically. So it changes, and I believe it's going to be the rule. I mean, it makes life much easier for lawyers, and I use it every day, and many people are using it on a daily basis, even for substantial work, which was something that was forbidden 2 years ago. Now it's the norm. So I believe the trend is changing rapidly.
Okay, then what task are they delegating to AI that save real time, and what task do they still hesitate to automate?
That's a great question. So at the beginning, people were using it in a very timid manner for instance, making summaries or getting, so like Google for getting information, but not related to a case, or to getting extracts of files, but just for very particular aspects. Now, people use it to have first drafts of, say, particular minor decision. And some people are even using it, and that's the case for the American Arbitration Association, for drafting entire arbitral words from scratch. So, it's changing a lot. Of course, the more substantial it is, the more fearful people are about using it entirely. So I think the guideline, I mean, there are many guidelines, and they have over-regulated the use of artificial intelligence in the legal sector. I mean, you have UNESCO, you have the European Union, you have guidelines from several countries, including the UK. In Colombia, we have guidelines from the Superior Council of the Judiciary, but I think it's been over-regulated in a very early stage. I mean, it's 2 years since generative AI has been released. they are already regulating something that we don't even understand. And we have even a judicial decision from our constitutional court saying that the judge cannot be replaced by AI, but it's full of contradictions and misunderstandings. So, but in summary, what I believe it's happening is we're going through a very rapid trend, a very quick learning process into adopting AI, into starting with mundane tasks like minor or more clerical work. And now it's getting into the real decision-making process. What I believe is that we will end up with a hybrid system where you will have the human on the loop. So the judges are the arbitrators reviewing a draft that it's already very well made by AI and perhaps editing it. And at some point, and that's not just myself, I mean, it's Richard Susskind, which is the guru of legal tech and artificial intelligence applied to the legal sector. He says that at some point, as humanity, we will realize how barbaric it was to allow human beings to make judicial decisions. There's a lot more coming.
Yeah, I mean that's very, very interesting. Okay, then Redek is working on AI-based legal knowledge system, which is a very important area because most legal productivity problem come from information spread across PDF, email, and people. Let's explore this properly. What is Redek building in the knowledge management space?
Okay, well, that's a question I love. But because that's like our baby now. Of course, we've been working on it for the entirety of 2025. And we call it the Sherlock project. So it started out like something more like a detective and more mysterious. But what we're basically doing is that we're doing both training and uh, having RAG, retrieval augmented generation, applied to human curated databases. So it sounds super technological, but the whole point is the reality of artificial intelligence as is now, even with specialized tools, including Harvey in the US or the one by Vilex or Tiran LeBlanc from Spain. Those are excellent tools, but they are generic. So it's a generic AI databases that will be applied to the legal sector. And of course, if you speak about Gemini or Meta AI or ChatGPT, Grok, whichever LLM that you can find in the market, those are really good tools, but they are rarely very useful for more specialized areas of law. So that means when you want to use ChatGPT for a legal query, particularly when it's a complicated matter, I mean, for instance, kind of a gray area in the constitutional law or in the arbitration matters, then most probably this LLM will not be as useful as it should be because the source of information is so wide, is the whole internet. You will not get, you will probably get hallucination, you'll probably get inaccuracy, you will probably get a lack of real depth and reliability on whatever the output of the LLM is providing you. And then if you go down one level into those more specialized tools, if you ask, say, about, I don't know, labor law or commercial law, you will probably find good answers because you have plenty of sources to fit that specialized tool. But sometimes it would not be enough for the lawyers who specialize in a particular area. So what we found is that in order to have that in-depth and really reliable source, you need to have always a human on the loop. And that's what we call a curator, or basically an expert who has the sufficient skill to define which source should be accepted by the system and which source shouldn't. And that's extremely important because the quality of the information you get will give you the output you're looking for. So having always a human on the loop prevents some of the failures that you can find even in those that lawyers forcibly have to feed and to adapt to their own needs. What we're trying to do is that we want to get communities to work around curated database that will be receiving constant feedback to improve, so that will be very useful to specialized users. To if you have a specialty in law, and then you're an arbitration lawyer, or you're a lawyer that works on insolvency, or you're a lawyer that works on mediation, like more specific fields, you will have better sources to begin with. So that's where RAG means you know, a difference into what you can really get as an output from this idea. So basically, when you have this curated database, you will be interacting with the community, and then you will be giving AI a soul. So we call it like an AI with a soul, in the sense that you will have humans interacting with it, giving constant feedback. So the database will be more and more useful over time, and you can have more specialized tools customized to the needs of a particular community of specialists, of people who really work on one area and want to improve their knowledge management.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And how does AI help structure legal information so that lawyers work faster?
Well, it makes a huge difference. People can say the huge industrial revolution for lawyers came in 2023, because we realized that any of those LLMs, those large language models like ChatGPT or Gemini or Llama, they were able to draft very well structured and very well written and with good grammar documents. That was impossible before. And then you can even give it the tone of a lawyer's, and you can give it also the technicalities to make it coherent and to be able to use it before a court. The risk behind it is that if you over rely on it, then you may be delivering basically garbage to the judge or to your client. So AI really simplifies what we thought was part of the art of lawyers: the proper use of language, the proper use of technical language. The LLM, that's why, according to the studies made by McKinsey and other companies around the world, the legal sector, or lawyers as a profession, are one of the professions who are at highest risk of being replaced by machines. But it hasn't been the case, and I don't believe it's going to be the case after all, because we've noticed, even if these models are improving day by day, they cannot get into the fine details that a specialist does over the years. So if you want to create better models, you need senior experts, you need humans also to train them, to give proper feedback. And also law changes every day. I think you will get a new regulation every single day. So you need to be updating it, and sometimes some of those nuances don't get through those models. So of course it makes a huge difference, because you can have a first draft in a matter of minutes. But then if you really want to win the case, then you have to work harder, basically. And the more sophisticated those AI systems are, you will get more sophisticated arguments and lawyers. So it will be this, I will call it a virtuous circle, in the sense that people will be learning along those systems to have also a better legal system in general. So it does make a huge difference, but then you need humans to work along with it to have the results society needs.
Yeah, no, definitely. And how do you handle privacy or confidentiality while using AI?
Well, that's also a great question. That's the first questions lawyers ask, because we have by law this confidentiality duty with our clients and also with society in general. So this the privilege or the professional secret that we hold under law means that we have to apply it to any single tool that we use, including email, or it's a handwritten letter or a phone call. So it applies to everything we use. And those LLMs quickly evolved to allow for restrictions and confidentiality settings. So now you can ask ChatGPT Pro to, keep your data private. But if you don't want your data to have any access to the internet, well, also RAG comes very useful, because with the retrieval augmented generation, what you do is that you have an encapsulated database, what we call the curated database, and that has no contact with the internet. That has contact with the inference model of the system, but it does not, it will not go to the LLM as such. So you have many technical means to provide for confidentiality. What's really funny is that we as lawyers haven't noticed that since we've been using Gmail or whatever, Outlook, whatever commercial email inbox so far, we've been feeding the internet in general, and particularly the LLM. So it's not as private as we thought. So of course, we do have to take some steps and measures to prevent this from happening. But I believe that it's not that hard to keep your data confidential if you take a few simple steps with the use of technology and with the use of both the LLMs and the specialized tools such as Sherlock.
Yeah. Okay, then I've been curious. Redek built a strong expertise in digital justice and dispute workflows, but now you're extending it to AI-driven legal knowledge and automation. Um, why why was this the natural evolution for Redek?
Well, I think it's a coherent evolution, because we're trying to build something that we call, uh, in Spanish, artificial intelligence is inteligencia artificial. So instead of artificial intelligence, we want to call it augmented intelligence, because it's this combination between what humans can do with the aid of technology. So this new AI, this augmented intelligence, basically consists in having proper knowledge management, combining the human skills of a senior, of an expert, and a community working around a particular sources of law, efficiency that is provided by artificial intelligence models. But my dream is to have it as a stepstone for digital justice. We're currently promoting a project in Guatemala. It's funny because I've been trying to work with the Colombian judicial system for years, for 5 years already. Paradoxically, I ended up having a first opportunity in Guatemala to implement this very same technology, Sherlock, for the purposes of one court, the second chamber of appeals in the civil jurisdiction in Guatemala. They want to run a pilot using Sherlock for the purposes of managing the knowledge of this court. Why is this important? When you do proper management, then the judge, the person in charge of making a judicial decision, will have very good sources and very good precedent to make a decision based on law. So you basically augment the capacity of the judge. So of course, we're starting out with lawyers communities. So we're now in conversations with the Colombian Institute for Insolvency. We're working with the School for Privacy and Data Privacy here in Colombia, with fintech, with arbitration, the Colombian Committee of Arbitration, because the best knowledge is not built by one person, but by a community of lawyers who really know what they're talking about. So when you have 200, 500, 1,000 lawyers who really know what they're doing, then you'll have better and better information at the end. So if you apply that same logic to courts, then you have better and better judicial decisions. So I think this is just a stepstone. I mean, ODR gets huge influence from artificial intelligence, and now you can see AI judges in China, AI arbitration in the US, some initiatives on AI mediation in Europe. So it's not that we're trying to change what we're doing. It's just a stepstone into our final goal, which is proper digital justice, answering the concerns that I had when I was a kid 20 years ago when I first went to a court here in Colombia.
Yeah, that's great. I have so many questions. Okay, let's move on to challenges. And every innovation has friction. And in legal tech, it's even stronger because the profession is risk sensitive. And what are the biggest challenges you faced when implementing AI for legal teams?
Yeah, well, of course, as you may have noticed, I'm an techno enthusiast, Laurent, but not all of my colleagues are. And so at some point I was saying that I was a prophet in the desert, right? I was trying to invite people. I was talking so much about online arbitration at some point. People said, like, give us a break, do it at some point. And then COVID came and it actually changed the way things worked. But of course, this was a very abrupt change and it came with many questions. And I can really understand why people are wary of those changes. But I would say the number one challenge to me is cultural. If you deal, we've also done a lot of consultancy both in Colombia and abroad. We've worked with the Monetary Authority of Singapore, with the Emirates Development Bank. We have worked with many organizations, but it doesn't really matter where it's from. I mean, it can be Colombian, it can be Singaporean. What really matters is the culture. If people are willing to change and if the current stakeholders are willing to make a decision for change, you can make a change that's going to be effective. But if they're not, it's going to be really, really hard. So for instance, why it's been hard for me to work with the Colombian judiciary, because they're taking very small steps and everything takes years. So they've been trying to implement digital filing for over 5 years with no visible results so far. So people still send and submit their the courts by email, which is extremely unsafe and not that reliable, but that's what's currently happening. Number one challenge for me, people tend to think it's confidentiality. No, for me, it's culture. And then you find a very diverse set of people all around the profession. So some companies are really forward looking and they're like, oh, what's the next big thing? And we want to work with you on what we should do. And some others are, okay, let's wait, let's hold on for a few years. Sometimes they say so. And sometimes they decide not to do anything. I think less and less people are saying, I will do the things the same way I used to do them 6 years ago because it's impossible. It's too expensive and they will get out of the market. But then yeah, you find several stages of AI and technology adoption, and then we have to target those people who want to do it. So why aren't we working with the Colombian judiciary, but with the Guatemalan judiciary? Because we were a lot more enthusiastic and open to getting a new cultural change. So that'll be the first risk or the first obstacle that we may face for this. The second one that I will mention, Laurent, is the rapid, I think it's also a challenge, the rapid change of technology. Because, for instance, we started developing a very cool tool with the Energy Group of Bogota, which is a conglomerate for energy and gas here in Latin America. We had the first meetings in 2022. And now it's 2025. The platform looks great, but it has no AI because it was not foreseen as an essential part of it at the very beginning. And now the directive team is kind of disappointed that they're not seeing. But of course, I mean, we couldn't foresee all these changes 3 years ago. This happened in 2023, so we will have to implement them now. So the rapid change, for instance, I really love the Sherlock project, but what if something better than RAC comes in 1 month? Then I will have to switch and then I will have to adapt to the new changes. So it's the exponential growth in technology really does affect the current developments because I'm working on a project for a year and then something comes and then the project is not the latest trend in technology. So you have to adapt and to stay at those steps. And then the third challenge that I have noticed and that I felt is that it's lack of planning. So at least here in Colombia, and we started as a B2B company. We started to try and promote, arbitration centers, company, public entities. So we tried to implement customized technology or customized consulting work for each of them. And then sometimes they want to do things, but they wait until October, November, December, and they want the results by December. And it's super, I'm telling you, October, November, December are the worst months of my year. So sometimes February or March, people are just okay. And then technology and the budget that they had for technology, they start spending it in November and they want results by December. So it's very complicated to deal with timing of those companies. So that's also one of the reasons why we're pivoting for a B2C solution that will be more stable over time. So that's why we're trying to aim for lawyers at the moment because yeah, that's perhaps something cultural as well in Latin America. But yeah, it's last minute decisions and also last minute work. And sometimes that's really stressful and doesn't bring the results you would want to have.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, I mean, obviously, that challenges cultural, technical, and that makes sense. Okay, if we project a bit into the future, what new role and capability will appear in the business
Do you mean for lawyers as a sector or
for
for us within
lawyers?
the
Yeah,
company? Yeah,
what new role, what lawyer
that's
role?
an excellent question, Laurent. So, I mean, I don't have a crystal ball to say what's going to happen, but what I've noticed so far, and you can judge the future from what you've seen now, I have several lawyers in my team who are doing, including myself, who are doing no legal work. So I think the role of a lawyer will have new trends or new ways of being performed. So I will say you don't need proper engineer lawyers. I believe that's not the case. Some people used to say that, no? Lawyers need to learn to code. I don't think that's the case. But you need to have legal designers, for instance. That's one new role. People who so look into a problem and then to look for a solution, not only within the law, of course, you need to know that, and then you need to understand the legal system, but also with the use of technology or with the reformulation of processes. Much of the work that we're doing is how do we change the way people work that doesn't really need technology to actually implement innovation. So then this legal designer is someone who, okay, so let's do contracts in this new different manner, or let's organize our team in an agile manner as they do in tech companies to deliver better results with the use of AI. So you will have, so one role that I really envisage is legal designers. The second would be AI trainers. So those curators who would know, who will be experts in law and will be able to give proper feedback to the artificial intelligence so that it can evolve and make better and better both decision support systems or actually decision systems or actually client advising systems. But for whatever legal systems that we want to work on, you will need proper experts in law who would have the knowledge to distinguish what's right and wrong when it comes to the information with feeding the AI with. And the third one is it's the one I am now, no, the legal techies. That's something that didn't exist. I don't know, 15 years ago. But then you need people to promote this change, to try to work along law firms, public institutions, companies to really make this change happen. So I believe those legal techies as myself are also very high on demand because this change does not happen abruptly. It changes happens over time. You know, this kind of thing will, you know, for the early adopters, of course, they're doing it now, some startups and some new law firms. But for the older ones, you will need that and then that more. So those three are the ones that I can think of.
I love it. Thank you so much. This is very, very cool. Nicolas, this has been a very strong and timely conversation. I think we could have another 2 hours of that, and maybe we should do it again
Absolutely.
in a year from now. And I mean, your insight on AI in the legal profession and knowledge management and where Redek is going next are going to resonate with many, many funders and legal innovators listening today. And thank you so much for taking the time. It was a great conversation.
Thank you, Laurent. I really enjoyed this and the questions were really interesting. So I really had a great time.
How can people reach you or know about you and your team?
Thank you, Laurent. If they wish to speak to us, they can contact me on LinkedIn, Nicolas Lozada Pimiento, if you want to look for my second last name. They can also reach us on our website, www.redek, redek.co. And also, yeah, they can look us up by email, nico@redek.co. And then, of course, I will be more than happy to speak to any of our listeners.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you again for joining us.
Thank you.
Okay, and that's it for today's episode of AI InterConnect. And if you enjoy it, share it with someone who's building the future or someone who should be. And until next time, stay curious, stay creative, and keep building. Thank you. Bye-bye, Nico.
Bye.